r/AskReddit. Ex-vegans, why did you start eating meat again? My aunt was a vegetarian for health reasons. The day she got diagnosed with cancer she went to In-N-Out. I mean, if I was her I'll do the same thing. I wouldn't really give a duck about meat if I'm dying anyways. Well, we're all dying anyway. Yeah, but she's like the Usain Bolt of dying. My nan, 75-year-old, was vegetarian, but a few days after she lost her daughter, my mum, to cancer, I saw her eating a pork pie. I was horrified and asked her what she was doing. She said she didn't believe in God anymore, so who cared? Outliving your child is one of the hardest thing I can imagine. Seen it with my nan. It was truly heartbreaking. I was traveling in Africa. Edit. This part of the trip happened to be in Zambia. Not that the specific location really matters for the point of the story. And stayed in a small village off the beaten track. I had just arrived, and as the matriarch of my host family was showing me to my room and helping me get settled in, her boys were out back slaughtering a goat for me. I couldn't turn down that meal because that goat represented a substantial part of the family's assets. The whole experience made me realize that the social constructs around sharing food are far more important to me than what the food is. If someone is serving it, I will eat it with gratitude. That's what the Dalai Lama does. When given a choice, he chooses vegan. If he's a guest, he honors the host by accepting what is served. He is a pretty cool dude, yeah. I'm still as veggie as possible, but I moved to a country where it's 1000% harder to be vegan, Japan. This is mostly due to not knowing a ton of Japanese and the fact that there is fish or meat in so many restaurant foods, and the culture here isn't like in America, where you can ask for items to be removed or substitutions. Not that my Japanese ability would allow me to do that anyway. Even the sauces, like oyster sauce, they're everywhere. I feel you. I'm not vegan, but I can imagine your struggles. The food in Japan was so good, though. That too. And it's pretty much guaranteed to be in every soup stock, because they're usually either pork based or seafood based, dashi. And yes, the food is so good. I usually just give the meat to other people and eat extra rice or noodles. I love me some carbs. I still eat mostly vegetarian food and have done all my life. However, my husband was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis and celiac, which means that a high fiber / lower iron diet is not an option, and a lot of the substitutes aren't gluten free. More often than not, when he has meat I'll leave it or have the veggie equivalent, but there are just not enough hours in the day to make 2 separate lasagnes and sauce, etc. I have a friend who turned vegan because of ulcerative colitis. Weird how it affects different people differently. Yup. Crohn's affects everyone on an individual level. What's good for one person isn't necessarily good for another. Also, your diet may be very different when you're flaring versus in remission. I know mine is. I was vegan for a year when I lived in a big city that had lots of inexpensive options for what one could eat. When I moved to a small town in beef country, the cost of good produce quadrupled, as did the cost of meat substitutes. I quickly learned that if I didn't eat whatever I could get my hands on, I would starve, so I started eating meat again. Some people say food deserts, and real. They are. There are food deserts in my city. People with no transportation buy what they can get. We are several communities that only have convenience stores within walking or biking distance. No public transportation in my neck of the woods, unless you are disabled. Food deserts are such a huge problem, and I'll yell about it real quick. Food deserts are not that there is no food available at all. Food deserts are that there is no legitimate grocery store for fresh produce / protein available. McDonald's and 7-Eleven being around is still a food desert. Places with these issues are often disproportionately poor or minority, forcing them to rely on fast and junk food, skyrocketing health problems in their communities, which they cannot afford healthcare to resolve or handle. This means that the poor or minority communities suffering through a food desert often will have high rates of other diseases like diabetes, high mortality rates from complications that in another community are far more common in an older person who could perhaps afford it. This plays into generational wealth as well, incurring medical debt, children never learning better food habits because there was no options putting them in the same cycle, affecting job prospects as they age, and need time off coping with their inevitable health issues at a younger age than normal for someone not in a food desert. Anyone who is vegan/vegetarian and shames poor people for having to eat what they have available, or who says food deserts aren't a thing should be punched in the face and made to live in a food desert on a low-income budget for a year. I was vegan for 3 years and had gone home to my community, which is tremendously poor. To have cold cuts and a bag of Doritos is a luxury. My aunt who was going blind made a family feast and everyone came, and she made a very traditional lamb stew. My heart broke when I thought of how much of her income she must have spent to make this possible, and felt like a completely entitled outsider when I told them I was vegan. They couldn't comprehend, when food is so hard to come by, why anyone would choose to not eat any protein available to keep from being hungry. Being vegan comes from a first world position of entitlement. It is a luxury to choose what you eat when so many eat whatever is available, not out of an ethical decision, but out of necessity. Did you eat the lamb stew anyway? I totally understand you ethically don't think eating animals is right, but I can tell from your post you also very much care for your family's feelings. It must have been a difficult, conflicting situation for you. I didn't eat it. Not then. I wish I would have. It was the internal conflict once I came home. I'm ashamed and disappointed that I'll let the opinion of a community that has no concept of the poverty I come from shape my opinion of what culturally was right. Got a genetic illness which makes me permanently anemic. My body only absorbs a tiny amount of iron from food, and that amount is burned pretty fast. Turns out it doesn't help to cut that tiny amount as well. Also, I didn't replace the meat, I just left it out, so I basically ate less food. Man, that sucks. But from the diet standpoint, most new vegans and vegetarians make that mistake as well. They cut out the meat, but then don't put a new source for protein and iron in their diet. I'm glad you got back to a diet that's healthy for you and your body. I was using veganism as a guise for an eating disorder for well over a year. When I finally realized I was in trouble, after losing 80 pounds, I went and bought lamb chops and devoured them. Also therapy. Same here. Restrictive prep heavy diets and disordered eating are a perfect storm. I did this with keto. It got so bad I was only having one meal and a coffee a day while boxing. Smart. While your opponent is watching your right hand, you splash them with the coffee in your left. I was on a diet for health reasons. When I was told I was allowed to eat meat again, my fridge started looking like a Mexican fever dream. I want to eat that dream. I'm imagining that as lots of dancing tacos, quesadillas, beans, and chickens while mariachi bands play on a swirling tie-dye background. I'm a vegan, but I'm on my annual cheat year. I think I will follow your form of veganism. I lost a lot of weight, to the point that people asked if I was okay. I was tired and had low energy. I ended up being anemic. I slowly ended up getting to a point that I started eating meat again. Your experience certainly reflects mine. We went vegan and involved our doctor in an effort to ensure we were doing it right. We tried a vegan lifestyle many years ago when our kids still lived at home, and my husband and younger daughter thrived on it, while our older daughter and I struggled with vitamin deficiencies and borderline anemia, and we wanted to be certain we were doing it right this go around. We had blood work drawn to measure nutrient levels, cholesterol, blood sugar, etc. Then we charted our food for a year. 3 blood draws in, and doc, who praised our menus, pulled the plug as my iron levels and some nutrients plummeted. I wanted this to work as we were committed to eating for planetary health, and my hubby, an amateur chef, learned vegetarian cooking and made delicious meals. His body, as usual, thrived in veganism. Mine absolutely did not. I keep reading people who say that going without animal products is healthful for everyone, but twice I tried and, despite our diet being signed off on by medical experts, failed. Once my nutrient levels were restored, we began reducing animal products in our diet, and I'm being monitored as we explore this option, but we just began in January, so I don't have results yet. Just a heads up, as both a vegan and a doctor here, most doctors have little idea of how nutrition works outside of a few modules they learned back in med school. If you want proper advice on a substantial diet, see a dietitian, not a nutritionist. Your own doc is going to know your medical results and labs of course, but their diet advice is often, not always, fairly broad and not even remotely comprehensive or up to date. The best thing to do is see a doctor and a dietitian where possible, and have them work together to get things sorted. Fairly stupid reason, because I broke up with my ex. I became a vegan to support her, and it felt weird eating meat, while she was so against it. When the relation was over, however, I no longer felt the need to support my ex in that way. Thus meat was back on the menu, boys. Not me, but my brother-in-law went vegan for a stretch. One of his pet causes is donating blood. As soon as he's able to, he's down at the blood clinic donating again. Anyway, on a vegan diet, his blood iron levels got too low to donate blood. So it was back to meat for him. But his daughter, my niece, is still vegan, and it's driving them nuts, because she'll only eat those vegan chicken nuggets, and they're getting pricey. That's funny because the last time I tried to donate before going vegan, my iron was slightly too low. But after going vegan, my iron was well above the threshold for donating. That's because I learned more about nutrition when going vegan, and know what I need to eat. It's very passive, though. You probably went vegan the right way, not the hip way.